The United States is no stranger to protest, yet April 5, 2025 etched itself in memory with a resounding hands off. Over 1,200 demonstrations erupted across all 50 states. This was not a singular grievance, it was a chorus of discontent aimed squarely at the policies of President Trump and his advisor Elon Musk. The sheer scale of the protests was impossible to ignore. From bustling city centers to quiet rural towns, Americans were making their voices heard. This was not the familiar partisan divide. The protesters were a tapestry of backgrounds: civil rights activists, labor unions, LGBTQ+ advocates. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with teachers, their shared concern etched on their faces. This wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about the future of America. The message was clear, echoing from coast to coast. Hands off, it was a demand for change, a plea to protect the values they believed were under attack. The nation held its breath, watching and waiting to see how this display of collective frustration would shape the days to come. At the heart of the hands-off protests was a deep-seated anxiety about the direction of the country. One of the most contentious issues was the aggressive government downsizing spearheaded by Elon Musk, now heading the Department of Government Efficiency. Musk, touting billions in taxpayer savings, oversaw the firing of countless federal workers and the shuttering of Social Security Administration offices. Immigration policies, particularly the increase in deportations, were another flashpoint. Adding fuel to the fire were rollbacks on transgender protections and significant cuts to federal health programs. This cocktail of anxieties, coupled with a perceived disregard for the needs of ordinary citizens, brought people to the streets. The faces in the crowd told a story. Roger Broom, a retiree from Ohio and a former Reagan Republican, expressed his disillusionment. He stated that the current administration was tearing this country apart. Lisa Gibbon, a former federal employee from Washington, D.C., criticized the layoff procedures as improper and unjust. These were not just statistics on a spreadsheet. These were people's lives. The hands-off. Protests were a visceral reaction to policies seen as callous and harmful. The message was clear. These issues were not mere political bargaining chips, they were about the very fabric of American society. The hands-off protests, while unsettling to some, were not without precedent. They were a stark reminder of the power of collective action in American history. The echoes of past movements resonated through the streets. The spirit of the civil rights movement, the fight for women's suffrage, the Stonewall riots, all were present in the chants and on the placards. The scale and impact of the hands-off protests were still unfolding. While they had not yet reached the magnitude of the 2017 Women's March or the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, their significance was undeniable. The diversity of the protesters, their unified message, and the geographical reach across all 50 states spoke volumes. The government's response was predictable. The White House issued statements asserting their commitment to protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid for eligible beneficiaries. However, they also accused Democrats of wanting to extend these benefits to undocumented immigrants, framing it as a threat to the program's solvency. The hands-off protests were a stark reminder that the fight for social justice is an ongoing process. They underscored the importance of civic engagement and the power of ordinary citizens to hold their leaders accountable. The question remained, would these protests be a turning point or just another chapter in the ongoing struggle for a more just and equitable America? The hands-off protests were not an isolated event. They were a culmination of growing anxieties and frustrations simmering beneath the surface of American society. The economic disparities, the erosion of social safety nets, the attacks on marginalized communities all contributed to a sense of unease and uncertainty. The protests, however, also offered a glimmer of hope. They demonstrated the power of unity and collective action. They showed that even in the face of daunting challenges, ordinary people were willing to raise their voices and demand change. The diversity of the protesters was particularly striking. It was not just one group or demographic, it was a cross-section of America, united by shared concerns about the future. The long-term impact of the hands-off protests remained to be seen. Would they lead to concrete policy changes? Would they force those in power to listen to the concerns of the people? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: these protests were a testament to the enduring spirit of dissent in America. They served as a powerful reminder that the fight for a more just and equitable society is an ongoing process, one that requires constant vigilance, unwavering courage, and a willingness to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. The hands off. Protests may have been a moment in time, but their message continued to resonate. The power to shape the future rests in the hands of the people.